Well, good evening and welcome to Yada Yahweh. My pleasure to be with you. I hope we have a much better connection than we had last week. In fact, last week was so bad that we're going to recover some of the ground that we did last week just so that we have some functional audio. Here with Kirk. Kirk is dealing with an ailing wife and an ailing dog, although Terry has now been moved to a facility that's much closer to home, which makes the transition in between the two much better. We're hoping that both have a recovery. We were talking before the show, Kirk, that the United States did something today that most of the world is going to say, well, not most of the world, most Americans are going to say, so what? Yeah, he was a bad guy. Kill him, no big deal. But what we did today, we killed the second highest ranking government official. He was general, but his second highest government official, only Ali Khamenei, is above him in terms of power in Iran. And we assassinated him. And clearly, Soleimani was a bad man. Much blood on his hands. No question about it. But when you target for assassination non-state terrorists like bin Laden or Baghdadi, both of which the assassination of both was counterproductive, and we can talk about that for a moment, made a bad situation worse. Killing Saddam Hussein, very counterproductive. Killing Gaddafi, counterproductive. We kill Assad, it will be counterproductive. That's one thing, is to kill by assassination a bin Laden or a Baghdadi. But it's an entirely different thing. As a matter of fact, against international law, to kill the second highest ranking official in an internationally recognized state, particularly a large state, Iran.
And a nuclear state.
Yeah, and well, it will soon be a nuclear state, certainly, if not already.
If it isn't,
the consequence of that, when you're dealing with a religion that has a bloodlust, and that their whole ego and persona and very existence is based on them proving that their God is better than everyone else's by killing, taking revenge. That while it may be true that some American lives were spared in the short term by taking out Soleimani, I will absolutely, unequivocally guarantee you that in the long term, it'll be, for everyone that was spared in the short term, it'll be 100 in the long term, maybe more. You know, it's 100 to 1 kind of thing. And, you know, it's one thing to invade an Afghanistan, which was stupid because of the fact that we were going against the Taliban, and the Taliban is the very organization that America put on the map through Zygmunt Brzezinski and Jimmy Carter, and armed them so that the Soviets could have a test of their own in Afghanistan. And we gave them surface-to-air missiles and anti-tank missiles and let them go to town, and they killed a couple of million people. And the Taliban then took over the country, and then the United States invaded, because we didn't like the fact that the Taliban made it comfortable for Osama bin Laden to hang out there, even though the United States is the reason the only reason that al-Qaeda exists in the first place, because the United States as a resource for jihadists during the Afghan war that America started against the Russians.
We are strange.
We are really strange. You know, we made a bad situation worse in Afghanistan, a bad situation infinitely worse in Iraq, where we gave Iraq to Iran. That's why the Iranian general was in Iraq and Baghdad. That's exactly why he was there. We made a bad situation infinitely worse in Libya. We made a bad situation infinitely worse in Syria. We just continue to do this like a broken record. And we're having dinner with a couple today, and we said, he had the standard, you know, he had served in the Marines, and standard response. Well, you can't do nothing. You know, he was threatening some Americans. He had killed some Americans. You can't do nothing. And you just want to say, oh, God, when is America going to wake up and realize that doing something, when that something makes a bad situation worse, is a terrible terrible way to react. I mean, that's like saying, well, Pearl Harbor happened. We had to do something. So what do? We sacrificed 350,000 American lives for the sake of the 2,000, and the 2,000 that were killed because we were stupid. Yeah. And because we were stupid and made them vulnerable, we're going to avenge that by sacrificing 350,000. And by the way, then for 50 straight nights, we're going to firebomb Japanese cities, killing hundreds of thousands of women and children, burning them alive, and that's the right thing to do something? God, what in the world is wrong with us?
Yeah.
Yes. Is there something you could do to Islamic terrorism to stop it? Yes. The first thing is you stop accommodating Islam, pretending like Islam is not the problem, and you, at the top levels of government, you say Islam is 100% of the problem. Mm-hmm. Fundamentalist Muslims or jihadists, they commit 95% of the world's terrorist acts. All of this is because of the religion of Islam. It's a terrorist manifesto. Tell the truth. Start there. Yeah. Have the guilty party be held accountable. The second thing that you do is you stop selling them weapons. If we stopped selling them weapons, they would beat each other up with sticks and stones and swords.
But that's all right. Let them.
Let them. You know, once the Brits decided they would reward Saudi Arabia, which at the time it was just Arabia, for their role against the Ottoman Turks, which was just a turf war between, whose sword was sharper. The Saud royal family formed an alliance with the senior Islamic cleric, which was Wahhab. And have you ever seen a video of their war? They were wielding swords on horseback. That's how they fought it.
Yeah.
Both sides wielding swords on horseback. I mean, this is in the 1930s, 1920s, 1930s. Let them go back to doing that. How many people are they going to kill? And realize, okay, so the Islamic State, really bad actors, and what they did to the gang rape of little girls and turning little girls into sex slaves, all that kind of, really bad actors. We get it. But since there's nothing we can do to make the situation better, we can't make it safe for democracy. There's no democracy in the Islamic world. I mean, by our invasion of Iraq, we gave Iraq to Iran. Mm-hmm. We made the situation worse. We broke the country. We made it worse. Lots of people died, over 1 million.
Yeah.
And we just don't get it. And this was a horrible escalation that is going to have devastating consequence, particularly since Iran will soon have the capability of a nuclear bomb. And guess who they're going to make pay?
Well, it ain't thrilled with us, guarantee you.
Yeah, and it's easier for them to detonate a bomb somewhere in America than and they're not going to send it over in a missile, although they have the missile capability to do it. They're far more likely to do that than they are to detonate one over Israel, because one over Israel is going to kill way too many Muslims, and the nuclear fallout would the way the prevailing winds work would just go right over Iran too, so it'd be self-destructive.
Yeah, they put
but the ways that you deal with Islam is the first thing you tell the truth about the religion, and that the fact that the religion is a terrorist manifesto. The religion is a call to war. It was started as a criminal enterprise. Muhammad was amongst the most disgusting people who ever lived. Tell the truth about the religion. The second thing that you do is you stop selling them weapons. The third thing that you do is you stop buying their oil, because you're funding your own funeral when you do that kind of thing. The fourth thing you do is you stop invading their countries. Don't send your men and women in to die. Stop invading their countries. You're making a bad situation worse every time you do that. Leave them alone. Yes, I know your heart will tug at their abuse of one another. You can't fix it. You can't play the police for the world. Leave them alone. And the last is quarantine it. Don't allow them to immigrate into Europe or into any other country. Keep them where they are. quarantine it as if it was the most deadly plague in the world, because it is. That's
no argument here.
Now,
no, that's absolutely
and
right.
unfortunately, that is the only way to deal with it. Stop bombing them. Stop killing them. Bullets and bombs make a situation worse when you're dealing with religious or political zealots. So if we continue the way we are, we'll continue to make the world more dangerous. Let's start using our minds instead of our arms. And by the way, that's really the right approach to everything. You look at, for example, the idiot in New Zealand that said, I'm going to show that New Zealand should be free of Muslims. Well, going into a mosque and shooting them was the dumbest thing you could possibly do, because it had exactly the opposite effect. I don't know, these guys that blame conspiracy theorists that go blame Israel for all of the woes in the world, when in fact, if you read every conspiracy theory's manifesto, where they're saying they're trying to make the world safe for white people because Jews are trying to eliminate them, the fact is the opposite is true, and has been true for the last 2,000 years. That is Gentiles killing in a genocidal rage and abusing Jews, not the other way around.
Yeah.
But every time that you have one of those Nimrods go off and do something stupid, he's working against their cause, because the solution is never bullets and bombs. Use your mind, use your words, wield words wisely. And we unfortunately can't get people to do that. Kirk, I'd like to return to where we were, Acts 13, beginning by the 14th statement, just so that we have a decent recording, because this is important to debunk the myth that Paul spoke for God. And by doing this, we're going to do two things. What we did here is we've isolated the two times that Paul went about debasing Dowd. And his speech in Acts 13, Dowd becomes nothing more than a sperm donor. Dowd's body is dead, it's rotten away, it will never materialize. And according to Acts 13, God hates Jews, and that the promises that God made to Jews are no longer viable, because they killed him, and because Jews killed God, God hates them. And the whole thing is so convoluted, it's amazing. Anybody in the world would believe it. But that's basically the theme, and that every promise that was made to Dowd was actually code for the promise being made to his Jesus Christ. And it's just not true. So, and the same thing is in Romans. We're going to cover the Romans statement where Paul makes the same claims. And in Romans, his argument is against the Torah. So the whole aspect of his Romans presentation is to destroy the merit of the Torah and debase it strictly on his religious faith salvation. And he will use Dowd in that process, which is just so amazing, since Dowd is the primary actor in the world, in world history, in terms of directing our attention to the restoration and the salvation and liberation that comes from the Torah. So, and he's used to prove the opposite point by Paul. And so we're going to cover both of those two. And in between the two, we're going to deal with how in the world the Christian New Testament became so anti-Semitic. And one of the worst is the Gospel of Matthew. It's extraordinarily anti-Semitic, and we're going to track down how it became that way. And then we're going to consider the emergence of and the history of the Roman Catholic Church by going through some of my favorite popes. It's a disgusting tale, but it's a tale that the world doesn't want to deal with. It just wants to overlook this stuff, and it can't be overlooked. For people to make the right decision about God, they need to know who's lying to them and separate themselves from him.
Yeah.
All right. On the Sabbath, which is kind of interesting since Paul was opposed to the celebration and observation of the Shabbat. On the Sabbath, they entered a synagogue and sat down. This would be Paul and his companions. And then it says, now, but don't minimize the fact that they entered a synagogue on the Sabbath and sat down. What that says is that this whole myth that Christianity is based upon the celebration of Sunday, that did not happen until the Christianity was controlled by the Roman Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
This is a product of Roman. It's a product of Roman Catholicism and Imperial Rome. Yahweh has one instruction, and everybody that is fluent at all in the Torah knows that his instruction is strictly the Shabbat. And if you're not observing the Shabbat as we are here, then you're at odds with God. And somebody will say, well, one day is as good as another. We should be honoring God every day. No. His instructions are, make the Shabbat, the seventh day, make it special. And think about that, too, as, you know, the world doesn't agree on very much. And in history, that's particularly true. But, you know, every culture around the world has a 7-day week.
They do, oddly enough.
And what's interesting is that there's no basis for a 7-day week other than Yahweh's instructions. Because if you want to look at the calendar that was in effect for all but the last 100 years, the calendar was essentially a lunar-based calendar. And a 6-day week works so much better. Either 5 weeks of 6 days or 6 weeks of 5 days, you get to 30. And 29.5 is the average month. So 6 days is hugely better. And the first counting system in the world, the first mathematical system, was in Summa. It was a 6-based counting system. That's how we get the 12 months of the year. That's how we get 360 degrees at a compass. That's how we get the 60 seconds, 60 minutes, and an hour, and 2 12-hour periods in a day is all based on the 60-based counting system. So even from that perspective, it should have been 6. But the whole world celebrates a 7-day week, and the 7th day in every calendar is still Saturday. And so the very existence of that throughout the world, when it's so unnatural, speaks for the original influence of the Torah prophets themselves. And even in language, the first development of an alphabet is ancient Hebrew, and how the effect that had on the world. So anyway, they entered the synagogue on a Sabbath. They didn't enter a church on Sunday. And now, mind you, this would have been right around 50 CE, so you're now 20 years after the fulfillment of Passover. And they're still entering the synagogues on the Shabbat. So this idea that, well, we have Jesus' resurrection, we're all going to start celebrating Sundays, and we're going to do it in churches, not the case. Not the case. Weren't any churches, and there was no Sunday worship. None. And keep in mind that, Christians. That's a powerful indictment of your religion. After the reading from the law, and it's amazing that it's called law, because so many things are transliterated. Like Satan is title. Satan's transliterated.
Satan, yes.
All right. So with all these things that are transliterated, they said they entered on the Sabbath. Well, that's a transliteration of the Hebrew term. So if you can transliterate the Sabbath, Shabbat, why in the heck can't you transliterate Torah? Why wouldn't they say after reading from the Torah?
Yeah.
They transliterate all these other words.
I know.
I mean, what word could be more important to transliterate other than Yahweh's name than Torah.
Mm-hmm.
But they couldn't do it. So after reading from the law, and it's not law, it's Torah, it means teaching and guidance, and the prophets, the leaders of the synagogue sent word to them saying, brothers, if you have a word of exhortation for the people, please speak. There is a 0% chance that happened.
Yes.
Paul had a horrible reputation. Paul, if you can believe anything he has had to say about himself, was a murderous thug. He, by his own depiction, said that he was a sexual pervert. In fact, he blames the Torah on making him a sexual pervert. He says, if it wasn't for the Torah, you wouldn't know that I'm a sexual pervert. It's the Torah that makes me a sexual pervert. And Paul admits that he dropped out of rabbinical school, where he claims he was the best student of the school, which is also a lie, and that now he's out touting this new religion. And he's calling Jesus, and there's no person named Jesus, but in Greek he's writing Iousu, Iousus, Iousun, which clearly is not a Hebrew name. And he's picked this man that he is now calling the Messiah through the Greek term Christ. And every Jew in the world knows that Jesus is not the Messiah.
No.
The prophecies regarding him do not fit. That is not his role. He was the Passover lamb. Entirely different roles. And so that's out. This guy that is been a murderous thug, that is a sexual pervert, this notion that they would say, if you have a word to speak, brothers, a word of exhortation for the people, please speak. There's a 0% chance they would have invited him to speak. He had a reputation.
2,000 years have passed, and these are the first time somebody put up a red flag.
Right. Why is that?
Amazing.
That it's so long for somebody to say
people.
that there is no chance that this is true.
Yeah.
Now, standing up, Paul motioned with his hand and said, fellow Israelites and you Gentiles who worship God. Now, what's the problem with fellow Israelites? I mean, he's claiming to speak for God. It's in the goddamn Christian New Testament, which they claim is inspired by their God. If you're claiming to write what God has inspired, how wrong can you be? Can you be 99% accurate and 1% inaccurate?
No, 100% all the time, every generation.
Every time,
applies.
right.
Yeah.
So what's the problem with saying fellow Israelites?
Well, Israelites were gone.
They were gone. They were gone. There were none of them
Europe
left.
Or wherever. No,
well, they were at that time.
There was some that went back to Jerusalem, but that's all. That's a very small.
Almost
percentage.
all of the northern kingdom was obliterated by the Assyrians, 600 BCE. So over 600 years, almost 700 years earlier, the Yisrael, the northern kingdom, was gone. Were there some remnants of the chosen people? Yeah, because they were hauled into slavery. And in fact, if you track the DNA and all the places that Yahweh said they were hauled off to, that he's going to call them out of, they're there. And it's a real headache right now, DNA studies for Muslims, because what they're finding out is, I'm a Jew. And so it's really hell out there.
Go kill yourself, man.
Yeah, and it's the most prominent people in these cultures. The most prominent people in these cultures are Jews. And so it is an interesting. Anyway, there were Israelites, but they weren't in the province of Yehudah. There's a reason that the Romans referred to the province as the province of Yehudah, because Yehudah existed and Israel did not. So he would have to say fellow Yehudim. But he didn't. He said fellow Israelites. It said he didn't know what he was talking about. Yeah, it's like in the book of Matthew, it talks about Jesus of Nazareth.
No, never.
What that says is that the book was written, that section was written after 300 CE. Because it wasn't until after Constantine's mommy went down there and tried to build, churches everywhere, that she came up with this notion that he came from Nazareth. Nazareth did not exist in the first century CE. Yahusha could not have been from Nazareth because it didn't exist. So one of the things that just shows you when the book had to be written, or at least that part of the book had to be written. You got to be really careful, and you need to be accurate when dealing with Yahweh's terms. Now, Kirk, you have been with me on this voyage now for probably 15 years. You know I make lots of mistakes. But it's a very different situation if I'm translating Yahweh's word to the best of my ability and then commenting on it, and I get something wrong. I just don't, for whatever reason, like when I first started writing, I talked about a renewed covenant. Well, there is no renewed covenant.
No.
And when I first started writing, I even tried to incorporate some quotes from the Christian New Testament, and shame on me. But I've worked to get rid of all of that over time. And you learn more, and you correct it over time. But you got to be accurate. So the next thing is, and you Gentiles. What does Yahweh say about the Gentiles?
Well, they wouldn't be there for one thing.
They wouldn't be there. No, in fact,
uncircumcised wouldn't be there.
Right. Jews do not solicit, do not encourage, and strongly discourage Gentiles to be part of their community. And at this time, which is now, this was on the cusp of Rome coming in to annihilate them the first time, and they would come back to do it again. Yeah. And then to also have having lived through what the Greeks did, which was
so they weren't proselytized.
Right. They are not. First of all, the Gentiles despised Judaism, which was the religion that would be practiced in the synagogues. They despised it, and they despised it for lots of reasons. But the single most important was the Greeks in particular, as well as the Romans. They were really fixated on their dinglings, and this idea that you would cut your dingling to be to fit into something was just disgusting to them. And the hatred of Jews goes way back in time, and so they would not have been there. And then the next line: fellow Israelites, wrong, and you Gentiles, wrong, who worship God. If you don't know God well enough to know that he despises being worshipped, and that to talk about him being worshipped is to demean him, then you ought not be speaking for him. I know this is really strange for most people's ears that because the Christian churches all have their worship services.
Yes, they do.
People talk about worshiping God. A God that would create an inferior being to worship him is insecure and isn't worth knowing. If we had the capacity to create a being to do that, it would be so disgusting of us to create a being to worship us. I've been doing this now for 18, 19 years. I spend 8-10 hours a day, 6 days a week doing this. I love doing it. And you've seen me. What is my reaction when somebody says, "Boy, I really appreciate what you've done. It's changed my life. Thank you so much." What if somebody says that?
Well, you kind of recoil. I mean, you just don't.
I do.
It's
I don't want to be praised.
Yeah. No.
I recoil a lot. Yeah. I for a long time I said, please don't do that. I'm just an ordinary guy that is passionate about this, and I gain far more from it than anybody else. So. Goodness, thank you, Yahweh. Please don't thank me. It makes me feel really uncomfortable. And now I just ignore it because it's just so much easier just to, if somebody says that, thank you, I just pass right by it. there's something really strange about letting people thank you for something. And I'm just an ordinary guy. Can you imagine being God and the difference between us and God, and that God would want us to tell him oh boy, you're really wonderful, God. Oh God, I just think let me praise you, God. Let me lift you up and praise. Okay, God has to be so enormous, and he is, from our perspective, he is infinity time to the fourth power. He is so enormous that if the notion that we, puny man, can lift up God when he is in the seventh dimension and infinity times 4 greater than we are is absurd. We can't lift him up. We can't raise him. But he can lift us up. That's his intent. Most children, most children do not lift up their parents. Can you imagine a little toddler about 2 years old and say, "Hey, Dad and Mom, come over here. I want to lift you up."
Yeah, Delane doesn't pick up her daddy and her mama.
No. So we ought to think these things through so that we understand that it's preposterous. God does not want to be worshipped. A God that wants to be worshipped is not worth knowing. There is a wannabe God that wants to be worshipped. Satan.
Yes.
That's the entire, the whole mindset of Satan is to shirk the adversary title, Satan, and to be worshipped as if he were God, so that men view him as if he were above Yahweh. And the fact is, in every religion, Allah is a guise for Satan. The Lord Jesus Christ is a guide for Satan. Men are worshiping Satan as if he were God.
Mm-hmm.
Satan wants to be worshipped. The real God does not. So, standing up, he motioned with his hand in Hitler-esque fashion and said, "Fellow Israelites and you Gentiles who worship God, listen to me."
Wrong. If he had said, "Listen, let's read from the Torah and see what we can discover," then you got
correct.
Then we got a mess. But he doesn't say that. He says, "Listen to me."
Let's talk about Dowd's 119th Psalm. Let's talk about the 19th Psalm. Let's talk about the second Psalm. Let's talk about any one of these Psalms. Let's talk about the 22nd Psalm, which would be the 22nd Psalm is an eyewitness account of what had transpired with Yosha.
What I didn't see, if I was Paul talking. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Let's talk about how the 22nd Psalm. Right. Let's talk about God choosing Dowd as the Messiah. Let's talk about Dowd being anointed 3 times as the Messiah. Let's talk about the fact that Dowd is the King of Kings and he's returning with Yahweh. Let's talk about the kinds of things that would enlighten you to the point that you can make an intelligent decision about Yahweh. Let's talk about the covenant. Let's talk about Abraham and Sarah and how God presented to them 5 requirements for participation in the covenant. And 5 benefits. Let's talk about how the Moed Mikre, these invitations to be called out and meet with God, facilitate the promises of the benefits that Yahweh offered in the covenant. Let's talk about the intersection of those things. Let's talk about how the Torah means to teach and to guide. Any one of those things. But no, he doesn't want to. Let's listen to Yahweh. He says, "Listen to me." But I, Paul, say, absolutely wrong. We do a lot of talking. You want to listen to us yibber yabber? That's fine. But what we yibber yabber about is what Yahweh said. Now, we will yibber yabber about people who claim to speak for Yahweh, speak for God, and lead people astray, because that is what Yahweh teaches us to do. He does it all the time. You have to expose and condemn those things that lead people astray to have people open to the truth, and so that they walk away from them.
Isn't it interesting when you talk about these things? not only doesn't draw a crowd, it doesn't. It even splits up a lot of the people. The more we get into it, where the words lead, it actually splits up a lot of the people who claim their covenant. And but you can talk. You talk what Paul says, and you can fill up a stadium.
Correct.
That's sick.
You know, it was interesting that if you're committed to sharing Yahweh's testimony, with very, very few exceptions, Dowd was a notable exception.
Yes.
But if you're committed to saying, this is what Yahweh said, and this is how it conflicts with, and it's counter to the religions of Judaism, Islam, Christianity, socialist secular humanism, what you're guaranteed to do is isolating yourself, to make yourself unpopular, to have people expose and condemn and hate you. You have to say, I'm going to check my ego at the door. It no longer matters. I don't care what people say about me. You have to realize you will never be popular. You will never have a following. You're going to be stunningly unpopular, and you're going to be very much isolated. And you're going to be criticized based upon everything you say, and in many cases hated. And if you do it, if your criticism is of Islam, you're going to have thousands upon thousands of death threats. That is what you should expect. Now, I am not saying that for any other reason than you need to know that if you do what we're doing, you are not going to have a crowd. You're not going to end up with what Paul has, because there just is. Well, look at Yahshua. Yahshua, and I know that Yahweh calls Moshe the greatest of the prophets, but and that's because we misunderstand prophecy. Prophecy is the revelation of Yahweh throughout time, and that Moshe's revelations were of time past, as opposed to mostly time future. But if you want to talk about prophecy future, the greatest of the prophets was Yahshua. And Yahshua, speaking the word of God, stunningly profound. I mean, you almost have to have a different vocabulary to translate Yada Yahshua, because his vocabulary is significantly superior to almost everybody else. And yet, you know how many people in his entire life Yahshua had that he'd say, okay, I can tell you this person is now has a relationship with Yahweh because of what Yahweh has revealed through me. None, not one. And he was as good as it gets. You don't get any better.
Are you kidding? Are you kidding? That guy's phenomenal.
Yes. So is Yermiah. So is Hosea. And so you've got to put yourself in that position. Now, what I have found for those saying, well, then why would anybody do what you're doing? The rewards for doing it are so spectacular because Yahweh is spectacular. Now, it's not. Kirk, we were talking before the show. Both of us have lots of aches and pains in our lives. We have lots of wonderful things in our life, lots of aches and pains. God does not say, hey, if you do this, I'm going to relieve all your stress, all your aches and pains. Look at Dowd. I mean, you couldn't imagine a guy that had more aches and pains in his family and in his life than he did. God is not going to eliminate your aches and pains and make your life blissful and happy here on earth. You're going to endure the same things now in the eternity. Of course, he does, but it's
a tough trip.
Look at it, Dowd. He was attacked from every possible way. His family fell apart in every possible way. Politically, nothing but strife. Militarily, nothing but strife. And his family, nothing but strife. And yet, he loved Yahweh and loved what he was doing. He wouldn't trade it for a nanosecond. And the same thing would be true with us in a more diminished way. We're not in Dowd's league, but it's the exact same situation. Right. What you do is you realize, God, I don't want a following. I don't want donations. I don't want praise. You want exactly, in fact, all of that stuff becomes an irritant, and all you want is to learn more and share what you learn. And those who want to capitalize on it, wonderful. And if you don't, that's fine too.
Yeah.
And it's a mindset that is so liberating, and knowledge is so powerful that every moment of it is spectacular in itself if you can keep your ego in check and you realize that you're nothing special. I know I am nothing special. I realize I only have this job by default. No,
that's so true.
That's it.
So true. And you choose some bad.
Yeah, not for any qualification. It's strictly by default.
Too, don't you?
Right. Clearly by default. Listen to me. Wrong. So far, almost everything he has said, maybe everything he said,
I think everything.
is wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The God of the people of Israel. Now, the God of the people of Israel has a name. If you're going to speak for him and you don't share his name, you do not know him.
Mm-hmm.
You ought not say a word. This would be every pastor, every priest, every pope, every imam, everybody in the world.
Yeah.
Do not claim that you're going to speak for God if you do not know his name. And he only has one name, Yahweh.
Yes.
And it's not hard to figure out how to pronounce it. Yod, He, Wah,
No.
He. It's three letters, one used a second time.
Yes.
The Y is pronounced exactly as it is in virtually every language except some of the Slavic languages where they render it as a J. And but virtually every language, the Y is pronounced just as it is in English. And the Hey is the Ah sound. And you didn't have to figure it out because, well, what's probably the second most commonly spoken Hebrew word to be Torah. The H at the end of Torah is
Torah.
from the Hey, right. And if you wanted how to pronounce the Wah in the middle of it, well, how about Torah again? Or Shalom.
Yeah.
The O and Shalom, the O and Torah are from the Wah. Or any one of the many names like Job, which really is Yoba. Yobel, which is the actual term for what's been corrupted to Jubilee. Yoel, Joel. They're all with the Wah, and it's this is not hard to pronounce. It's extremely easy to pronounce, and it's Yahowah, God's one and only name.
And starts out with Hayah. To give you a clue.
Well, yeah, he tells Moshe that it's. I am who I am. And it's Asher and Haya. The sentences, those are the words in that sentence. And Haya means to exist. I was, I am, I will be. So the God of the people, it's Yahweh, the people of Israel, the God of the people of Israel chose our ancestors. Yes, he did. So that makes them the chosen people. So how could the church be as chosen if it's comprised of Gentiles, if God chose our ancestors?
It's an easy debate so far.
Yeah, man. He ought to have thought this through because, by the end of it, by the end of just this speech, it's God choosing to condemn them because they aren't worth saving.
Yeah.
So somebody has gone back and said, wait, we need to edit this thing because now you've got the God wanting to kill them because they're not worth saving, and you just said here that he chose our ancestors.
Yeah.
And by the way, how is it our ancestors when the last group that he said was you Gentiles who worship God? Who does our represent at that point? If he said you Gentiles and fellow Yahudim, the God of our people chose our ancestors, that would be grammatically correct. But to have it follow Gentiles and it's our ancestors, at the very least you're suggesting that Israelites and Gentiles were equally chosen. And that is not the case.
No.
He made the people prosper. No. He offered the people prosperity if they honored the conditions of the covenant. But actually, the people of Yisrael and Yahudah were impoverished as slaves. And he has them. He made the people prosper during their stay in Egypt. Oh, my God. They were slaves in Egypt for 400 years.
Yeah.
Unless you view being a slave as prosperity, that's the dumbest thing you could possibly say during their stay in Egypt. Wow. Let's go prosper as slaves for 400 years. That ought to be fun.
Bring your shackles with you.
Yeah, please. With mighty power, he led them out of that country. Actually, he did not lead them out of that country with mighty power. He led them out of that country. Yeah, he led them out of that country with an 80-year-old broken down man.
Oh, shepherd man, from Arabia. Yeah.
Yeah. Did he plague Egypt? Yeah, but a plague is not leading them out with mighty power. He could say that he issued plagues against Egypt that demonstrated his power and influence. He could even have said each of the 10 plagues in Egypt was specifically designed to demean an Egyptian god or an Egyptian religious belief. And that would have been really insightful, very insightful teaching. But God did not lead them out with a powerful hand, with mighty power.
They walked out and they were given things by the Egyptians, please get out of here. So they were encouraged by the people to walk away as well.
Right.
So that's not
right. The actual going out was, please get out of here. Now you can say, oh, well, what about when he destroys the Egyptian military that was pursuing them? They were out of Egypt.
Yeah. And they were
at
moving
that time
towards Jerusalem.
Right.
Yeah, so on the way.
Right.
So then
right. And that wasn't leading the people out. That was to keep them from being killed. So it's just technically, I know, you're saying, okay, you're nitpicking. Well, so far, most of these things haven't been nitpicked. They're just right. You get your facts right. You know, they say people are entitled to their opinions, but not their facts. We ought not be entitled to either. Facts are facts. Get them right.
Right. Correct.
For about 40 years, he endured their conduct in the wilderness. You know, that part's accurate, except for the fact he endured their conduct. Come on.
Tolerated.
He was actually frustrated by their conduct. And to say that he endured it is actually a way of saying that, you know, so they had some bad conduct, but, you know, God's merciful. He just puts up with that stuff. He'll endure it. He'll overlook it. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Yeah, he waited till almost everybody would die off. Right. Yeah. Because he didn't endure it. He didn't endure it.
So he was, I would say he was intolerant at that point.
Yes.
He let him die off.
Yeah, as opposed to him enduring it, he was intolerant of it. And he overthrew 7 nations in Canaan. That's not true. It's not accurate, by the way, and it's not relevant. What Yahweh did, and they weren't nations, but there were clans of various people, just clans, in Canaan. And Yahweh said, here are the clans that as you go into Egypt, I want you to eliminate. And Jews did not follow his instructions. The Yehudim did not. Had they done so, Yisrael would have been a very different place. And you might say, well, that's pretty mean that God would have them, wipe those people out. Well, what he first said is that the corruption of those people was so overwhelming at that point that there was no hope for them. And at that point, they were so plagued with religion and their putrid politics that it would be like sending your family in to live in a home that was filled with rats that had the bubonic plague and they were flea bitten, so that you knew that if you sent your people in there, the overwhelming preponderance of them are going to die.
That's not
what a father does.
No, I was just going to say I have books on my shelf of all these theologians, and they agree with that. That he cleaned out his house. These people were putrid. Right. These people were horrible, and they cite it.
Right.
So I mean, that's not a new thought coming from you. That's exactly at least even they agree that he's
Now,
cleaning
we have
house.
to be careful here. Does
Mm-hmm.
Yahweh have any ongoing orders for us to kill anybody else anywhere in the world at any time?
Absolutely not, which brings us back to Trump's story. I'm going like, well,
Right.
who gave you the right? Who gave you the right?
Yeah, in fact, last time I read the instruction, you shall not make a habit of killing. Well, the United States is making a habit of killing. It's not our job to do that.
No.
Use our words. Use Yahweh's words.
Mm-hmm.
You know, speak words wisely, and the more of Yahweh's words you can speak, or His perspective on these things,
the wiser
better
you'll be.
Right.
Yeah.
So He did not overthrow 7 nations in Canaan. It's a wrong statement. Giving their land to His people as an inheritance. No, He did not give their land.
He returned their land. Yes.
He gave His land to His people.
To the right. Yes. Yes.
And oh, by the way,
Much better
if He gave land to His people as an inheritance, then can you please explain to me how you could have replacement theology? The only way that you could have replacement theology with Paul having just made that statement is for God to be a liar, for His promises to be worthless. And if God's a liar and that He gave that land to His people as an inheritance, and it's not really true, it now belongs to the Christian church because God doesn't want to save any more Jews, that's how this thing ends, then why would you trust God to do anything?
That's exactly
if He reneges on His promises. And replacement theology, you can just throw it out the window if God gave His people their inheritance as opposed to Goyim. So He's destroyed the basis of His religious mantra with this statement. All this took about 450 years. Okay. I am not the sharpest tool in the shed. But 40 years as guests of Egypt, 400 years as slaves in Egypt, and 40 years leaving Egypt in the wilderness. Is that 450?
No, that's a little.
480, isn't it?
480.
Right. And by the way, 40 is really important. If you don't understand the importance of 40, then you're a dunderhead. I mean, how many days did it and nights did it rain during 40 to 49?
The water came down for 40 days. Yes, the flooding. Yeah,
yes.
So.
Right. 40 is in fact everything that God talks about. It's a period. You're marking a period of people enduring a time of testing. It's always over 40. 40. Always 40. 40 years in the wilderness. 400 years as slaves in Egypt. Always 40. Because He wants you to understand that He measures time as increments of 40 Yobel. The Yobel is a 50 plus 1 year period. The Yobel years are where slaves are freed, land is returned, and debts are forgiven. Well, that's symbolic of something really important. The land becomes the inheritance for the people again. Not owned by individuals, it becomes the people's inheritance again. Slaves are freed because the Torah is about liberation. It's about freeing people. And all debts are forgiven, which is the whole concept, the basis of matzah and our salvation. And so it's 40 Yobel. How many years is 40 Yobel?
Oh, it's 2000.
Right. So if you look at the time that Adam and Chawah were booted from the Garden of Eden, you go forward 40 Yobel, what do you come to?
Year 4000, yeah.
Well, that'd be 2,000 years after that.
Abraham.
So you're looking at 2968 BCE. That's when Abraham and Yishak go up to Mount Moriah and enact what will happen there later with Yahweh providing the Passover lamb, which He did through Yosha, and it's upon that the covenant is ratified. The single most important thing to God is the covenant, and the covenant is ratified 2,000 years after Adam and Chawah were booted out of the garden, and It's an extraordinarily important event. And then 2,000 years later, year 4,000, what happens?
Yahusha, yeah.
Yeah, Yahusha, the Passover lamb. Yeah, arrives just as God promised He would provide on Mount Moriah, that He'd provide the Passover lamb. That's what happened 2,000 years later. 2,000 years after 33 CE,
we have the return of Yahweh and
Dowd.
Yeah.
Coming back with the Messiah and the King of Kings, Dowd.
And King of Kings.
The ultimate fulfillment.
Now, the minute,
and with go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the minute you say, and you said it constantly, and no one, I don't think most of us overlooked it, of course, but the minute you say that the covenant is this most important thing, it's a familial covenant. It defines everything that this whole process has been about. It's just no way around to bowing down. There's no way around worshiping and so forth. It's father, mother, child. And it's constantly talking about this is my most important thing in so many words.
Right.
So that wipes out all religion of its own. You cannot have that. It's like also last week we were talking, and I meant to jump in and say that you cannot you cannot love something that you fear. You've said that. I'm quoting you, and that's absolutely correct. That you cannot do that. So that every avenue you go, every direction you go, it's all about family. He wants to have a family. And once you get that concept, at least for me it was, once I got that concept firmly rooted in my brain, all the other stuff starts to fall away because you know that cannot be so. Otherwise, he's a liar.
Right.
And
it's all about the covenant. All about the covenant. There's only one of them.
Can't say it enough.
So then it says, after this, God gave them the judges until the time of Samuel the prophet. No, Samuel was a judge. So
yes, he was.
So since Samuel was the last of the judges, the statement is errant. Now, I tried to write that in the chapter, and every time I conveyed it, somebody said, well, because he was a prophet, why are you nitpicking this? Well, because it says, after this, God gave them the judges until the time of Samuel. No, Samuel was a judge. Yes. So you can't say until the time of Samuel. You would say gave them the judges until after the time of Samuel, then it would be accurate. And Samuel was a judge, not a prophet. The fact that he spoke, since there's some prophecies in Samuel, but the prophecies in Samuel aren't Samuel predicting the future. Samuel is not really functioning as a prophet. Samuel, through this whole process, functions as a Shabbat judge.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's really important to know why the judges exist. The word Shabbat means to decide, to distinguish between right and wrong. The thing that was so important to Yahweh is to have people who were literate, who could study the Torah, and if there were disputes, would render a decision based upon a verdict based upon what the Torah has to say. It's like when we're criticizing Paul here, it's because we're exercising good judgment on what Yahweh has to say in his Torah teaching. And that was the role of the Shabbat judges. We're doing that same kind of role today in condemning religion and politics, and statements like here of Paul's. We're judging. We're executing good judgment. Samuel was the last of those, and that was his role. And so he misses that when he doesn't explain what was the purpose of the judges, what does Shabbat mean, which is to decide, and why is Samuel's role principally as a judge?
Well, in that particular society that Yahweh wanted to have, he didn't want you didn't need a king, you didn't need an army. He said he takes care of all that stuff. He will protect you. He will. So you didn't need a king because he was your shepherd. He gave you directions. Yahweh taught you. So you had, but there still will have conflicts between. Well, wait a minute. I think my boundary line is here. and you said it's there, or you did that, or you got some of my sheep over there, and so forth. So you've got to have a place where you can go to make your claim.
Yeah, right. What does the Torah say about these things? And one of the things I would ask you, Kirk, why was Shamuel the last of the judges? Was that God's decision? Said, okay, well, Samuel, that you did this job as well as it can be done. We're not going to have another one. No more judges. I'm making a decree, no more judges. Was that Yahweh's decision?
No.
Why was Shamuel the last of the judges?
Very disappointing, because they chose a king and they chose an army.
The people went and says, we want a king to lead us in the way of the Gentiles. The very thing that Yahweh said, don't do. You don't want a human government. You don't want to follow the ways of the Gentiles. And Israel said, well, that's what we want.
Okay, and said,
now, when the people say this is what we want, and it's diametrically opposed to what God is offering, then there's a consequence.
What's the point of having it? Yeah,
right.
The point of having it?
They have free will, so they have to be able to choose. Sure. But the moment they said they want a Gentile type government, God had to give them what they wanted, and it eliminated the purpose of the Shabbat. Kings do not take well to being judged.
No.
So it was over for the judges, and that's why Shamuel was the last of them. And it's also interesting, of course, is that Shamuel is the person through whom God revealed why the choice of human government was two things. That it was actually a rejection of Yahweh. The choice to vote for a Trump or a Hillary Clinton is the choice not to be allied with Yahweh. According to God, if you choose to ally yourself with a human government or a political party, then you're choosing to reject Yahweh. Read Shamuel's introduction. When Shamuel comes and he says, I'm so sorry, Yahweh. I have failed you. They have rejected me, and they want a king in the manner of the Gentiles. And what does Yahweh say to him?
Yahweh says it's not you they're rejecting. They're rejecting me.
Correct. So if you are political, from God's perspective, you're rejecting
You made a very bad choice. Yeah, absolutely.
You made a really bad choice. If you're one of those people who is condemning Trump based on political reasons or praising him based upon your political aspirations, then you are rejecting God. Yeah, you're rejecting God. And that's your choice. You can do that. Yeah, Israel did it.
I know he has free will. He has to give you free will, or else there's no way for you to respond or choose him. But boy, that's just very plain. Wow.
So did Paul write in Romans 13 about how the Roman government, but all governments, but he's writing on behalf of the Romans, are inspired by God or appointed by God or authorized by God. They're here for good, and that you ought to submit to them. Did he say that?
Yeah, that's Christians tout that constantly and fly their flags at the same time. It's just
now the very Romans that he was writing about, what would they do just 20 years after he wrote those words? Maybe 15.
They will destroy all of Israel, Jerusalem first, and
destroy the temple even.
Israel later, and the temple.
Destroy the temple even. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then in 133 they would come back. And they would rename it, Yahowah became Philistia. They salted the land. They hauled virtually every Jew that they didn't kill off into slavery. That's the start of the diaspora. That's why so many Jews were in Europe.
And they burned every Torah.
And Hadrian built temples to himself and to Jupiter on the Temple Mount. And that's a force for good? That you think that God has authorized them? If you read Romans 13 and you look what Rome did to Yahowah, and you can square the two, then you are an idiot.
Yeah.
Just an absolute moron. And if you can say that all governments are a force for God, then what about an Islamic government? What about the communist government that there is no God?
Yeah, no,
I mean,
sorry.
How can you be a Christian and carry around, the seminal writing, that the top thing that Paul ever did is Romans. Romans is his creme de la creme. It's his crescendo. It's the basis of the religion of Christianity. And yet he says you have to submit to all governments because governments are appointed by God. They're a force for good by God. Governments will never wield the sword above you if you're doing good things and submitting to them, only if you rebel against them. And you want to tell that to all the Nazi Germans and all the 12 million people that they killed between Jews and Roma gypsies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You want to tell me that was a good government by God? You want to tell me the Roman government that besieged Jerusalem twice was approved by God, and that he wanted his people to surrender to them?
You can make that case.
The communist who say doesn't even exist. And if you're a Christian and you can't square, which you can't rationally, Romans 13, with reality, you've got to either live in the make-believe world of faith, or you've got to go where the words lead, which is to reject Paul. He lied. And we say this because guess who was the person that Yahweh inspired to explain why human governments are always counterproductive? It's Samuel.
Well,
you want to find God's, God's
reasons
for you ought not do that. This is what's going to happen. He's going to tax you. He's going to take your sons and turn them into soldiers. Mm-hmm. He's going to have all sorts of people that he's going to bribe around him for loyalty. He's going to corrupt your daughters. He's going to steal your and tax your produce. He went through and just all the things that government's going to do throughout the ages. Shamuel's statement, Yahweh's statement through Shamuel about human government, is the antithesis of what Paul wrote in Romans 13.
Romans 13, yeah.
If one was telling the truth, the other was a bold-faced liar. And since Yahweh, who happens to be God, provided those answers through Shamuel, it means that absolutely and unequivocally, Paul not only didn't speak for God, he was speaking against God. That is the only way that you can be aware of both statements and be rational. Mm-hmm. It proves emphatically that not only didn't Paul speak for God, he spoke against him.
Yes.
So to mention Shamuel, for Paul to mention Shamuel, the very person who proves emphatically that he's wrong. Who was it that Yahweh said, I want you to go to Bethlehem? And the person that I have chosen, I want you to Masiach, anoint that person, the Messiah. Who did he ask to go do that?
Shamuel went to find David, yeah.
Right. And so when you realize the very person that Yahweh chose to do these things and to reveal his condemnation of government, which Paul praises, and the anointing of Dowd as the Masiach, and Yahweh's choosing him is all through Shamuel. For Paul to mention it is like Paul quoting from Shabbat, the book that condemns him as the plague of death. What he is saying by mentioning Shamuel is every goyim that is listening to this is so stupid and so ignorant, they won't realize that I am now citing someone as a prophet who, if you read his words, contradicts everything that I'm going to tell you. But you're so stupid, you won't realize it. And your religion, even when you try to square them, will blind you to it. That's how brazen he is. And it's like the conclusion of the second letter to the Corinthians. Paul admits that he's demon-possessed, and Christians are clueless. They read right through it.
Oh, what is this thing in his side? It's thorn in his side, Give me a break.
He tells you it's a messenger from Satan.
Mm-hmm.
So Samuel was the prophet. In fact, it's his testimony that Paul's statements regarding government are totally opposed to one another. Paul's claims are thereby invalid. Also telling, after Israel made the wrong choice, and after Shaul proved to be as rotten as God predicted, Yahweh asked Shamuel to anoint Dowd as his Messiah, Messiah, something Paul fails to mention because it voids his entire mantra.
Mm-hmm.
Paul then continues, then the people asked for a king, and he gave them Shaul, son of Kish.
They chose
Shaul. God did not give them Shaul. And to get this wrong, this goes right to the heart of this transition in Yisrael from being Torah observant to being adversarial to the Torah. Because it was Shaul that God hated. In fact, God says, I hate him. I didn't choose him. The people chose him. I hate him. In fact, when somebody is lamenting over him, God says, why in the hell are you sorry for this rotten piece of garbage? I despise him. Speaking of Shaul.
Yeah.
I've got somebody that can do this job. You want a king? I'll at least give you an example of what you should. My view. And he's a shepherd.
Yeah, he's a shepherd.
And like the first person that he told Samuel to go down to Bethlehem and find this person, and the first person is really tall of stature and really handsome, and that was the eldest son of Yeshai. And Samuel saying, I know this guy is going to be anointed by God really soon. He is. Yeah, he is. Man, cool. Look at his stature.
You're the man.
Oh, that is the guy. You know what Yahweh says to Samuel? And this tells you that Samuel was more judge than he was a prophet. He says, no. I do not look at man the way that men look at men. I look at a person's character, their ability to exercise good judgment. That's how I look at them. This is the wrong guy. So to mention that God mentioned Shaul. By the way, is there a correlation here between the name of King Shaul and Paul's given name?
Absolutely, same name.
Same name. Mm-hmm. So for him to say that God gave them Shaul, what it is basically saying is I'm going to invert reality. Because what it does is, since Yosha chose 12 disciples and Paul Shaul was there at the time and he didn't choose him, it's now God chose him, that Shaul, so God must have chosen this Shaul. That's what he's trying to infer. But the fact of the matter is, God didn't choose him.
No.
He didn't choose him. That is a bold-faced lie. And it's a lie that goes right to the heart of Paul's egotistical claims to be an apostle.
Yes.
Of the tribe of Benjamin. That ought to be a clue. Guess what? Guess why Paul would say of the tribe of Benjamin? Because Shaul was also the tribe of Benjamin.
Yes. They're not a good group.
And that is not a good group.
No, it is absolutely from curse from their mother.
No. All you need to do is to realize that Yahweh at the end says, I want to reconcile Yisrael and Yehudah.
Yeah, this is a great.
I'm going to reconcile Yisrael and Yehudah. Yisrael represents 10 of the 12 tribes.
Yes.
Yehudah represents 1.
Yes.
Guess who is omitted from that if you say Yisrael and Yehudah?
Well, obviously you lose the Benjamite.
Benjamin, right, because the Benjamites were part of the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Yehudah, and and in fact, really rivals of them, but never associated with Israel.
If you recall, when Dowd's son gathered up his army, he went to the Benjamites to do it, didn't he? Am I incorrect on that? I don't think so. I think he went over there and gathered up his army there to attack his father. There's nothing good about Israel.
Who ruled for 40 years. Now, what he doesn't tell you about Shaul is that God said that he hated him, and that Shaul became the archenemy of Dowd. Just as the wannabe apostle Shaul became the archenemy of Dowd. And that it was Shaul's unwillingness to pay attention to Yahweh's instructions. In fact, God says, Shaul, it tells him through Samuel, by the way. Samuel goes to Shaul and said, because you have not paid attention to Yahweh, because you have not observed what he had to say, because you haven't listened to what he had to say, you're done.
Yeah.
You're over. God hates you, and it's over for you.
Wow.
Now, guess who doesn't say that here? And if you're going to be teaching about Shaul, you need to teach that. God didn't choose him. The people chose him. By choosing him, God said, you're rejecting me. That's essential. And you better darn well know that by doing that, God explained why human politics and governmental systems were going to be so disastrous for humankind. And then God said, because you have not listened to what I've had to say in the Torah, because you have not observed the conditions of the covenant, you're done. I hate you, and it's over for you. Why didn't he say that?
Well, it's counterproductive to him.
Yes, counterproductive to him. And if you're saying that, by the way, now let's just pretend for a moment that Shaul, Paul, is really in the synagogue. And he's saying that God chose the king, that God chose Shaul.
Well, the rabbi would jump up and say, that ain't so.
Oh, that ain't so.
Yeah, I read it. Yeah, let's go look at it.
Yeah. When he said that God gave them the judges at the time of Samuel the prophet, he said, that ain't so. When he said about 450 years, they say, that isn't so. The Jews aren't stupid.
They would have run him out.
They know their history. Any one of these moments, they'd have run him out. They would do exactly what I'm doing and saying, it isn't true. After removing Shaul, actually Yahweh didn't remove Shaul. Shaul got himself killed.
Tried to kill himself. He couldn't do it.
Yeah, actually, he wanted his armor. He wanted his armor bearer, to kill him.
Kill me.
Kill me. Yeah. But
fell on his own sword or something. But it's
right. Yeah, he did not remove Shaul.
No.
Shaul got himself killed. He made Dowd, David. He says David here, and he doesn't even know that his real name is Dowd, because he could have written Dowd in Greek, but he didn't. He wouldn't transliterate the name correctly. Their king, God testified concerning him. This is what he quotes. I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do. Now, if you are a student of the Torah, which the rabbis would have been, they would know that's factually untrue.
They know
that is an inaccurate statement. God did not say he will do everything I want him to do. Dowd did a lot of things God didn't want him to do.
No, he did quite a few.
But free will is essential. God does not order people to do stuff. And Dowd most certainly didn't, and that's not what the statement says. So that's a whopper of a deception. And it's so typical of Paul. He began accurately and then added his own embellishments. Now, keeping in mind that King Shaul is prophetic of the Christian Shaul Paul, here's what the text actually reads. It says the following. So, Shamuel said to Shaul, you have acted foolishly. You have not observed the conditions of the relationship Yahweh your God has appointed for you. So now your kingdom shall not stand. So, you have Shamuel actually calling Shaul an idiot. You have acted foolishly, stupidly.
Yeah.
Why?
Yes.
Because you have not observed the conditions of the relationship of Yahweh your God, which he appointed for you.
And I'm sure what you were translating in Shamar Mitzvah, I mean, which is
Yes.
what he's asked us all to do, and he's repeated that 1,000 times. It's not that, oh, you killed the wrong person there, or you let somebody go in the back. He just, you spit on my mitzvah.
Yeah, and what's amazing here is that the condemnation, right? The condemnation of Shaul, calling him an idiot for not observing the mitzvah.
Yes,
and yet, right. What does Paul say? He said, "That can't save. It's been annulled. It no longer has any merit." So Paul's entire crusade against the Torah is destroyed by Paul saying, "You're foolish, Shaul, because you haven't observed, closely examined, and carefully considered the terms of my covenant relationship." That's what mitzvah means.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you can't figure that out, that the very statement that leads to this statement about Dowd that he has misappropriated here and misquoted, the introduction actually destroys Pauline Christianity. God called the man stupid because he did not observe the mitzvah, which is the heart and soul of Yahweh's Torah instruction.
Yes, yes.
Yahweh has sought for himself a man whose inclinations and judgment are similar to his own. Now, does this take a little bit of thought? Yeah. You have to know that, and it's easy to figure out today. I mean, the legacy, the information that confirms this is so ubiquitous. It probably takes 15 minutes of research. In the mind of the Hebrews and in the Torah instructions, heart is not the seat of emotions as it is in English. The liver was the seat of emotions.
Yes, where you churn.
The heart is the seat of thinking, of the place where what you were observing was processed such that your response would be appropriate. It was the seat of judgment, where you exercise good judgment. It defined your character, your inclinations, and your conscience, your ability to think rationally and morally. And so you have to know that. But that's easy to verify. I'm sure you've done the research on Leb and Labab and what they meant. And there is no question. You look at any one of the lexicons, and they'll say mind, thinking, conscience, ability to discern right from wrong. That's what the Leb spoke of.
Yeah.
Right. So what God is saying is that Yahweh has sought. Now this is the next statement. I mean, this is Shamuel listened to him, 1 Samuel 13:14. What we just read was Shamuel listened to him, 1 Samuel 13:13. So God has just said that Shaul is an idiot because he has not observed the conditions of my covenant. So God says, I have chosen a man whose inclination and judgments are similar to my own, which means he is going to observe the conditions of the covenant.
Right.
And that is consistent with Yahweh's own inclinations and judgment.
Right.
And Yahweh has appointed him leader over his people because you have not closely examined nor carefully considered, Shamar, that which, to reveal the benefits of the relationship, Asher, Yahweh established for you.
I just had a thought. Yahweh is such a great teacher. He doesn't need anyone to rewrite anything he says. We spend all our time trying to figure out how deep it is, and just find layers and layers and layers of it. With Paul needs about 10,000 theologians to rewrite what he said because he's so damn stupid. and so truncated in everything he does, that
Right.
you have to have all these other people to present it, make it even plausible.
So all you have to do here is if you read what God said in context, and this is one statement here, Samuel 13 and 14. If you read what he said in context, it destroys a direct counter to the point Paul is trying to make.
In plain as day, easy to look up.
Yeah, right. And then Samuel's testimony is a far cry from "He will do everything I want him to do." Let me read that again, because the quotation that Shaul, the wannabe prophet, the apostle Paul said, is, "He will do everything I want him to do." This is what God actually said. And Yahweh has sought for himself a man whose inclinations and judgment are similar to his own. And Yahweh has appointed him leader over his people. Paul missed that part, didn't he? And Yahweh has appointed him leader over his people, because you have not closely examined or carefully considered that which to reveal to the benefits of the relationship Yahweh established for you. It doesn't say that Dowd is going to do everything I want him to do. It says that Shaul did not.
Yes.
I mean, you can't be more errant than this. And if you're going to quote Yahweh and you're going to get it that wrong, you should be, laughed out of town. Laughed out of town.
Think. Well, he's still saying the same thing, and people ain't laughing him out of town. That's the tragedy of it all.
Yeah. Shamar, translated closely examined and carefully considered above, is the same word Christians misrepresent as keep when directed at the Torah, creating the false impression that it's comprised of laws which must be obeyed. And while it is a small point among these big issues, while Dowd was the son of Yishai, it was not stated in conjunction with this conversation, nor relevant to it, and thus was inappropriately and incorrectly cited. From this man's descendants, God has brought Yisrael, the Savior, Jesus. Sorry. The Savior title is afforded to Dowd by Yahweh, not to Yosha, as he promised. There is not a single promise anywhere in the prophets that this man's descendants are brought to Yisrael as a Savior, much less Jesus. Jesus isn't mentioned in a single prophecy. Yosha is not even mentioned in a single prophecy.
No.
Not once.
No.
Not once.
Wow.
Yosha is the Passover lamb. Dowd is the shepherd. Dowd is the king. Dowd is the Messiah. According to Yahweh, Yosha is not. So what Paul has done here is he has misquoted God, and from that misquote, so he's got a false premise, he makes the conclusion that Dowd's contribution was he was a sperm donor. From this man's descendants, God brought to Yisrael, the Savior Jesus. No.
Yeah.
And by the way, the people there would have known that God's not calling Yosha Jesus. They would have known that he did not have a Greek name, Iusus, Iusu, Iusun. They would have known that he was not brought to Israel, as Israel didn't exist. And they would know that there wasn't a single prophecy regarding Jesus, not one. They would have known all that. From Paul's perspective, Dowd's lone contribution to Yahweh's plan was sperm. That's about as demeaning as it gets. Moreover, having revisited the prophetic pronouncement in 2 Samuel 7, which he is inferring, we now know that Yosha was neither mentioned, identified, nor promised in the text. Paul is has misrepresented the facts now 10 times already and has lied 3 times. And again, while it's a gnat among camels, Israel did not exist at the time, only Yehudah. The 10 tribes comprising the northern kingdom had been taken from the land and enslaved by the Assyrians 600 years earlier. Further, Yosha's affiliation with Dowd was through Yehudim, Jews, the very people this Benjamite wants to destroy.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the fact of the matter is that the prophecy is about Dowd. Yahweh sought for himself a man whose inclinations and judgment were similar to his own, and Yahweh has appointed him as leader over his people. It doesn't say that he has appointed Jesus.
No.
He chose Jesus. No, he chose Dowd. He appointed Dowd. Why? Because he carefully considers and closely examines the relationship Yahweh has established.
So what does that tell us? We're doing exactly what he loves.
Correct.
How wonderful.
Now this goes on to say, before the coming of Jesus, and it's actually Yosha, and by the way, his name is vitally important. If you do not know his name, you do not know him. Any idiot that uses the Greek name Jesus has no clue who the actual individual was. Because his name is Yosha, it means Yahweh saves. It says, before the coming of Jesus, John, and he's not John, he's Yahukanan. Yahukanan means Yahweh's merciful, and Yosha means Yahweh saves. As actually Yahweh liberates. It's Yasha, means to liberate, to deliver.
Set free.
Yes, to set free, to rescue, and thereby save. Saving is a derivative of liberation, liberating from harm. Preached repentance through baptism. Actually, he didn't preach baptism, and he never spoke of repentance.
No. Total
to all the people of Israel. No, he didn't speak to all the people of Israel. The 10 tribes comprising Israel were long gone. He only spoke to those people who just were curious and came down to hear what this guy had to say that was in the Jordan, because he was a curiosity. To say that he spoke to all the people of Israel is utter and complete nonsense. Paul is consistently careless and routinely incorrect. As John, actually Yahukanan, was completing his work, he said, "Who do you suppose I am? I am not the one you are looking for, but there is one coming after me whose sandals I am not worthy to untie." So what he has done here is the same thing he did previously. He took one snippet that is accurate and then twisted the rest of it so that the result is somewhat credible because, well, the sandal untie is a statement that he may well have made. But the rest of it he did not say. And you don't get to some truth when you blend irrelevant snippets together to provide credibility when your primary premise that you want people to believe is wrong.
No, that's the definition of Babylon and commingling.
Yes.
That's the whole thing.
It is telling
point.
that Paul omitted Yahukanan's lone relevant citation. It's the one that he cited from Yahshua 40. And we've translated Yahshua 40. Yahshua 40 correctly points to Dowd, not Yahshua. It's also telling that Paul misquoted Yahukanan. According to the disciple Yahukanan, the Yahukanan who is being referred to here did not ask this question of himself. He did not say that he was not the one they were looking for. He did say, "Among you stands one you do not know. He is the one who comes after me, the straps of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie." What a profound difference. Paul erred an additional 6 times. fellow children of Abraham and you God-fearing Gentiles. Oh. God does not want his children to fear him. If you're a child of Abraham, you're a child of the covenant, that's the last thing God wants you to do, is to fear him. If you choose to be religious, you will end up fearing him because you'll be judged by him.
Mm-hmm.
But you cannot fear your father and love him. And that's what God wants,
Correct.
is a family relationship where he is dad. You cannot fear. So God-fearing is a religious concept. In fact, Paul would have known it, that in the book of Yeshayah, it says that the fear of God is a religious tradition that is taught by rote. And God condemns it. It is, then he says, so fellow children of Abraham and you God-fearing Gentiles, it is to us that this message of salvation has been sent. Paul, Yahweh sent his message of salvation through actual prophets. He sent this message through the likes of Moshe and Dowd. Further, Paul's salvation message was the antithesis of Yahweh's, making all of this a deliberate lie. Every bit of this is a lie. Why is it that there isn't a single Christian that can tear this apart and say every bit of this is a lie? Why do we include this liar's testimony in a book that we say is the inerrant word of God? Why do we do that?
Got me there. Got me there.
It says the people of Jerusalem and the rulers did not recognize Jesus. Actually, many did recognize Yosha. And those who did were the very people Paul sought to kill.
Yeah, I hated them.
Now, the Ebonim is a prime example of those that would be hunted down and killed. And we're going to speak a lot, because it turns out that Yahweh had a lot to say about Ebonim. It's a term that he uses in the prophetic discounts. No, excuse me, that's Asher in the background.
Yes.
No. Excuse me. It's a statement that Paul is saying here, something that he himself was guilty of doing. He was the one that went out and hunted down to kill those who did recognize Yosha.
Mm-hmm.
And it says here, the people of Jerusalem and the rulers did not recognize. That makes it sound like everybody in Jerusalem and all of the rulers didn't recognize him. Well, guess what? The fact of the matter is, many people, not only did many people recognize him, there was no Jesus. And this notion that Paul has that Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, of course they did not recognize him as, first, a Greek title. And they didn't recognize him as the actual Messiah because he was never anointed by God.
Mm-hmm.
Dowd is the Messiah. They know it.
Right.
Dowd was anointed by God 3 times. So it's Dowd that is the Messiah according to God. So of course they didn't recognize it. And Yosha doesn't fit the Messianic profile. The Messiah is a Gibor. He's a fighter. He's a warrior. Dowd was a fighter and a warrior. Yosha was not.
No.
And so he isn't. Of course they didn't recognize Yosha as the Messiah because he wasn't the Messiah. What he was the Pesach lamb, and guess what? Paul didn't recognize him as the Pesach lamb.
Yeah.
That is what he is. He's
right.
the Pesach lamb. It's a really important job. It's what Yahweh promised to do. Without the Pesach lamb, there's no doorway into Yahweh's home. It's the doorway to eternal life. So the role of Yosha is vitally important. It's God fulfilling his promise to provide the sacrificial lamb. And this notion they didn't recognize Jesus sets up this myth that, now Christians today want to harass Jews. You need to recognize Jesus as your Messiah. No, they should not, because he is not. There was no person named Jesus, and he wasn't the Messiah. I would love them to recognize who he was, because who he was is really important. He was the Pesach El, the Passover lamb.
Fulfilled his promise. That's exactly
but guess what?
We should honor
Paul
him every year.
Never once called him the Pesach lamb. Never once.
Yes.
And he refers to him as the Christ as if he was the Messiah, and he was not.
That's so bizarre.
Yet in condemning him, whoa. The people of Jerusalem and their elders did not condemn him. It's the Romans that Paul was writing on behalf of, not Jews who condemned Yahusha. All Jews did is what they had to do, what they should have done, and they should be thanked for having done so.
Delivered him up.
They delivered the Pesach lamb.
That's right. That's the job.
The Romans then executed the Pesach lamb. But they delivered the Pesach lamb. That is what you're supposed to do. They did it. If they hadn't done so, there'd be no salvation for anyone.
Yeah.
God would not have fulfilled the promise of Pesach. He would have lied to Abraham. There would be no covenant family, no eternal life, if they had not delivered the Pesach lamb. So it was not Jews, the people of Jerusalem and their rulers, who condemned him. It was the Romans. And they said, yet in condemning him, Paul writes, they fulfilled the words of the prophets that are read every Shabbat. Bold-faced lie. There isn't a single word from a single prophet that tells that Jews and the rulers, the people of Jerusalem and their rulers would not recognize Jesus and they would condemn him. Not one. Not even a hint. There is nothing of the sort. So how can they be accused of every Shabbat of reading words that say that God fulfilled this promise that the Jews would condemn Jesus, when there isn't a single statement anywhere in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms that says that? They couldn't have done it on any Shabbat, much less every Shabbat. There isn't a single prophecy regarding Jews condemning or killing Yahusha. Not one. Moreover, it isn't true. So if there was a prophecy that says that Jews are going to condemn Jesus, that Jews are going to kill him, it wouldn't have been accurate. And then God would have been a liar.
That's right.
The one prophecy in Yahshua 53, which speaks of Yahusha's role as the Pesach lamb, is skipped over and isn't read by Jews on any Shabbat. Do you know that many synagogues, and this is a real custom of Judaism, they'll parade the Torah up, like it's a whore. They put it in this really fancy dress and all of this drippings over it, and they parade it around like it's an idol. But what they will do is they have a systematic way over the course of 1 year of going through the Torah, prophets, and Psalms and their readings. Guess what they always omit? Yahshua 53.
Yeah.
So the one that talks about the sacrifice of the Pesach lamb, and it doesn't say the Pesach lamb is being condemned by Jews. The Pesach lamb is assuming this role because God promised that we would do it. He's not blaming his people for it.
No.
And it's the one place where it talks about the Pesach lamb is Yahshua 53, and it's the chapter that's skipped in every reading over the course of the year. It doesn't take much, folks, for you to figure this out. that Paul is lying through his teeth. You know, how much deception does it take for a person of faith to recognize that they have put their faith in a habitual and prolific liar?
Well, I was thinking a little while ago when you read a couple of verses, a few verses back rather, and there was the word repentance, and that's from a Latin word, like a penitentiary, where we get penitentiary, and it's always about punishment. It's not repent would mean if I told you to repent, I would be asking you to go punish yourself.
Right.
Which defeats the purpose of someone else paying the price for you.
Right.
The whole thing.
Yahweh never asks us to repent. What he does, he asks us to do, is to change our direction.
Yeah, well,
rather than pursuing the ways
go in a
of
different
man.
direction. Right. Go, exactly.
Yeah, that choice that you made for Shaul was wrong. That choice of ignoring my Torah instructions was wrong. Go in a different direction. Chasing after false gods was wrong. Yes. Return to me. Yeah, giving the promises that I gave to my people and to Dowd to someone else is wrong. Change and go in a different direction. Mm-hmm. God does not ask you to repent. Just change throughout the lives. Now this then, Acts 13:28 says, they found no proper ground for a death sentence. They asked Pilate to have him executed. No. In truth, the Sanhedrin found a reason to kill him.
Yeah, because he said his name.
Yeah, he said Yahweh's name. So the Sanhedrin found a reason to kill him because according to the Jewish law, if you say Yahweh's name, that was a crime punishable by death. And the reason that the rabbis and the Sanhedrin imposed that is because if you know Yahweh's name, and Yahweh is introducing himself to you by name, and he's encouraging you to participate in a relationship with him on a first-name basis, then you don't need a rabbi to interpret everything for you.
You mean you can approach an exalted one?
Yeah, if you come and say, hey, Craig, my name's Kirk, and hold out your hand, my name is Kirk, can we sit down and talk? I'm not going to go to Ned and say, I can't understand this guy, Kirk. Could you tell me about him, please? No, Yahweh is reaching out to us by name. He's a very good communicator, and it's essential that you know that the reason religious Jews had it be a death sentence to say Yahweh's name is because if the people know it, then they know they don't need them.
Yeah. That's a terrible thing if you're collecting money.
Yes. And so they actually had a reason for a death sentence according to their trial. They had a reason for a death sentence. Mm-hmm. Now, there is actually no historic indication whatsoever that Pilate, that the Jews gave him over to Pilate to be executed. I know it says that all over the Christian New Testament. No historical evidence of that whatsoever. As a matter of fact, what we know about Pilate, and we're going to talk about this in a later program, we know for certain how he dealt with someone who had messianic claims. He not only had them killed, he slaughtered all the people that followed after him and believed him. He is vicious.
Yeah, they don't waste any time. They don't waste any time. They don't ask for they don't take prisoners.
Yeah, because Rome couldn't stand a rival.
No.
And so if somebody had messianic claims, particularly if someone claimed to be a king or was claimed that they were a king when the only authorized ruler was the Roman emperor and those the Roman emperor appointed over their territories, their provinces.
Right.
That was treason. Romans immediately killed somebody for that. So if there was somebody making these claims to be a Messiah and to be a king, if Yosha made either claim, Pilate would have sought him out and have him killed, and everyone that followed him immediately.
Post haste. Yeah.
Right, and we know that because of the
history.
What Josephus specifically wrote about Pilate's actions. One of the most famous statements of Josephus is how a false Messiah came to be, and how Pilate not only wiped him out, but everyone that was following him. And because it's treason.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Jews at that time despised Pilate. You know why the Jewish religious leaders, the leaders of the Jewish community, despised Pilate? They hated him. You know why they hated him?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay. The last person that a religious Jew or a Jewish leader would have gone to and say, can you solve this problem for us, were the Jewish religious leaders. Because what Pilate did is something that the Jews detested. And every leader before him had accommodated the Jews, because if you didn't accommodate them, there was no way to govern the province. You just have to kill everybody. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't in the Romans' interest to go and wipe out a province, because a province was a source of men for their legions. There was a sense of taxation. It was a show of their power. And so the last thing they wanted to do was to sacrifice legions, and they lost legions to Israel just to destroy a place. The reason they hated Pilate is that Pilate thumbed his nose at the Jewish religious mindset, because he put in godlike effigies of Roman emperors and Roman gods everywhere. He was famous. As a matter of fact, all of the Jewish religious leaders are on record. I shouldn't say all. The Jewish religious leaders are on record, very famous in terms of the documentation, of petitioning everybody above Pilate to say, you got to get this guy to stop. What this guy is doing is inflaming the people. You're going to have a riot here. You got to get him to stop hanging these religious imagery of Rome and Roman gods everywhere. If you don't get him to stop this, you're going to have a revolution here. You're going to have riots here. They hated him. They went to Rome to get him repealed. That history is not in dispute. The last thing they would have done is cozy up to Pilate, and the last thing Pilate would have done is listen to them, because they were at that time actively seeking his removal. So you think he's going to give them an audience? Do you think he's going to give a hoot what they want? They're trying to get him removed from power. And they're using the Roman commitment to try to quell rebellion because it's good for business. And they're saying this guy is starting a rebellion. He's bad for business, Rome. So you have no chance
about 50,
that this is true.
This is about 50 CE when he's writing this?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, by the way, about
so
probably 50, right around 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what, by the way,
he's got to have enough time to make the lies like this.
The Jewish leadership was so incensed by Pilate, they had countless Jews that laid down for 5 days in front of the Procurium in protest of this man. They tried peaceful protest. They wrote letters. They sent envoys. They hated him and were willing to risk their lives to have him removed. There is a 0% chance that it worked the other way. So, in truth, the Sanhedrin found a reason to kill him, because based on their Talmud, he spoke Yahweh's name. But they were powerless to do so. It was Rome that found no proper ground for a death sentence, but killed him anyway, according to the Christian New Testament. But that's also not true. If you listen to the Q&A between Yosha and Pilate, which, by the way, I don't think any of it occurred, but should it have occurred, Pilate would have had to have killed him. This notion that Pilate said, I find him innocent, I'm wash my hands of this, absolutely did not happen, because the moment there is a messianic claim, the moment there is a kingship claim, instant death. He is a traitor to Rome. They're going to kill him instantly. The last thing they were going to say is he's innocent. The whole thing is not only made up, it's the opposite of what would have happened. That said, very little of what now is in the Christian Gospels regarding the events which played out before Pilate is historically valid. or even internally consistent. And later in this chapter, we're going to study the origins of the Gospel of Matthew to ascertain just how it came to reflect Paul's anti-Semitic statements. Up to this point, Paul has already made 17 claims which are demonstrably inaccurate and has deliberately lied on 9 occasions. And yet he hasn't revealed a single nugget, not one thing that is useful or true. Nothing.
I don't mean to be laughing in the background. I'm just stunned. It's kind of I'm just stunned. And I've read this material. I've studied some of this stuff as well, all to the side, and I'm going, this is so damning to Christianity. I don't know. We can use it. We can use it, but I don't know if anybody's going to take it to heart. A very few. That's the tragedy of this whole thing. It should just knock you on your feet. It's like
it should.
If you're Yehudim, you found out who Dowd really is and what Yahweh said about him, you should be just so elevated in your thing. You should embrace it like, wow, that's the God I was looking for all these years.
If somebody believes something which you can show is absolutely not true, you're not depriving them of something. You're giving them this tremendous gift. In writing Prophet of Doom, I said this is devoted to Muslims. Let the truth set you free. And rather than a Muslim being mad at me for writing Prophet of Doom by putting the Quran in chronological order and setting the context of Muhammad's life as it is presented through the Hadith, you should be grateful. And by exposing and condemning Paul and the inaccuracy of what he wrote, you should be grateful, because no longer would your faith be in something that's going to lead to your demise. You have hope at that point.
Yes.
As opposed to, there is no value in wishing upon a lie and believing a lie. Hope, truth is the only thing that provides a worthy outcome, not tying into a lie. This is a great gift to Christians. But yet, 99% of Christians that hear this, rather than receiving it as a gift, are going to condemn me in particular. They're going to say that Kirk, he's a nice guy. We won't throw him on this. But that great guy, he is just a real jerk.
That's not quite accurate. Yes. They just look at me like...
And you'd be happy, by the way, to be in that same bus that's thrown into that same bus. Yeah, we're going to be condemned. In fact, we'd like to be condemned on behalf of Yahweh. It's not condemned by Yahweh, but condemned on his behalf.
I have no.
By the way, Kirk,
that,
we are 1 minute. We're 1 minute away from being automatically cut off. So rather than doing that, why don't we just say goodnight? We'll. I've had a great time with you this evening. It's really, in a way, it's really fun to be able to expose lies like this, because it's the possibilities once you're liberated from them are so marvelous because of what Yahweh is offering. Yeah. And by the way, we're going to go into the washing of hands and how that was not a Roman practice. And we're really, at this point is when it really gets good. So please join us this time next week. And lovely to be able to have a conversation and not cut out every 15 minutes or 15 seconds like we did last week. So may Yah bless. May the best for Paint, your cute little doggy, and of course for Terry. May this week be better than last week, and happy Shabbat to one and all.
Y'all have a wonderful week. See you next week. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, my friend.